Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic today? Let's do it. What's the creepiest or eeriest thing that happened to you while walking alone at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I'm pretty sure my little brother is watching over me, and sometimes he kicks the back of my seat when I'm driving, or at least that's how I've been explaining it to myself for years and multiple cars. It always seems to happen when there's something I need to keep an eye out for. Deer, shit drivers, something on the road. So it's like he's trying to warn me, and now when I feel it I simply pay better attention. But it also happens sometimes when I'm talking to whoever is with me. For instance, my oldest daughter, who had a rough year at 16, typical teen shit, has made leaps and bounds to catch up in school and in earning my trust back. She's done so well, and we're so close now, but during a convo, when I was telling her how I'm proud of the many things she's accomplished, I felt the kicking on my seat. There wasn't anything on the road, but I just had a feeling it was like him trying to say he was proud of her too. Who knows if I'm right or not, but he was definitely the type to be heard when he was alive. And he was an amazing uncle, and more like a father to his nieces and nephews. So it wouldn't be unusual for him to want her to know he's proud too. Plus, she's fully aware that I think he kicks my seat, and it's just a normal thing. That sounds incredibly crazy to think it's a normal thing, but it helps me feel better about a huge loss. Okay, I wasn't the one driving, it was a friend or roommate. We had just gotten home from a restaurant. About a couple of miles away from the restaurant is a road, and there's nothing but trees. So we're driving, and he stops the car. I asked him why he stopped, and he said, "That dude is crossing the street up ahead. I don't want to scare him." I looked up the road while he was looking at me. There's nobody there. So we start going again, and I hear a loud thump. So I look out the back window, and there's a dark figure about 4 yards behind us. The figure was maybe 7 feet tall, and all black except for a white streak going across the figure's chest. I asked if that's the person he saw. He said yes. So we just kept going, not even caring anymore. A few minutes go by, and we're in the city now. We're at a red light, and the figure is sitting on the sidewalk with a teddy bear in its hand. When we started going again, it just looked at us. When we got back to our apartment, we both went to bed. An hour or two goes by, and I wake up to the sound of my roommate screaming. He told me that the dark figure was staring at him through the window. We live on the 4th story of the building. Man in the middle of the road. I was learning to drive. My cousin worked, so the only time she had to help me was in the evening. We were going down a straight bit of road, and I was practicing changing gears. It was in a remote area. Then he was suddenly in the middle of the road. We both gasped, and I smashed the clutch and brake, and we went straight through him. Stopped the car and looked around, but there was nothing to see, and we knew we didn't hit anyone, but we both saw him. I was driving back from my job, which was 5 hours away from home. Couldn't transfer home yet. I was about 40 minutes from home. I was coming up the road, and I could see a barn set off the road and nothing else. As I was getting closer to being parallel with the barn, about to pass it, I saw what looked like someone flicking a cigarette. This was in the middle ground, the barn, the cigarette, and the road. I could see the lit end arc and then I assume hit the ground, but there was no one there. 4 days later, when I was driving back to work, the barn was no longer there. This was roughly 16 years ago, and I still wonder what that was about. I was stalked by a shadow person all through town. I grew up in a very safe, amazing, tiny town that almost could be called a village. It was very pretty and pleasant at night, so I took a lot of walks at night. The sidewalks through town were always well lit, and the path itself was well maintained. One night on the path through the town center, I had turned around to look at the moon, and I saw the shadow of a person quickly move behind the edge of a building or in the corner. We had had incidents of unfriendly folk in town before, but not for a long time, and no one was ever hurt, so I figured if I pretended I didn't notice this person, they wouldn't feel threatened to act out or do something unpredictable. I kept walking, but with my head kind of turned so I might see them in my peripheral vision. But after getting about 30 feet away, I figured they'd left, and I turned my focus to in front of me again. Then I saw the same thing, the shadow of a person disappearing behind some bushes or shrubbery on the side of the road up ahead. At this point, I had two thoughts. One, Two people are planning to gang up on me, or two, a ghost? I'm a little skeptical about the paranormal, so I went into survival mode and took a hard left to follow a dirt path down away from the town center and shortcut to halfway down the sidewalk back toward my house. This path is not well lit, so I ran through it to get back to the lit sidewalk as fast as possible. When I reached the bottom of the path, I ran across a small dirt parking lot in front of a small abandoned pizza parlor and onto the lit sidewalk. I turned around to see if I could see anyone, and by the short wall that bordered the midtown sidewalk and the dirt area, I just scrambled down, and there were two figures. They were too dark. The moon was full. Everything was being backlit well enough that I could see details on the lamps and decor in the town center from where I was, probably 60 feet or so. But these human shapes had no detail, just black, solid silhouettes. It looked uncanny, and it unnerved me. I walked briskly back to my house, and when I got up to my porch, I turned around one last time, and they were standing at the end of my road about 25 feet away, still solid black and detailless. There is no way I walked all the way home with them walking close enough behind me to be that close to my house at this moment and also have me not hear them walking. The sidewalk is well maintained, but it still has pebbles and sticks and stuff on it. It's almost impossible not to be heard, especially at night when it's quiet. I had seen them and immediately went inside, so I saw them for less than a second. I still am skeptical about what I saw. I kinda hope it was shadow people because the thought of two actual people following me at night freaks me out more. But that incident only happened once. Very weird stuff.
I like this story because it really touches upon the fact that what would be scarier, a paranormal entity or real people? Sometimes reality is scarier.
This happened to my parents. They were driving their way back home after going to the cinema when they noticed a girl standing on the left sidewalk. It was very late, but she didn't look like a street worker because she was wearing casual clothes. My dad found it weird, so he mentioned it to my mom, and when they both turned their heads to see her, she was nowhere to be found. It happened so quickly that there's no way she went inside a building or ran down the street. She just disappeared. As a child, I used to take the garbage out when my mom asked me to. This one evening, it was already dark. I ran down, and when I got to the container about to throw the garbage in, I noticed red light around me. My first thought was that some kids were pointing their lasers at me. This was in the 90s when lasers were a hit in Romania. But then I noticed the light is coming from above. I looked up, it was shining right on me, like I was in the center of the light cone. The light then turned off, and what remained was a white dot. The next second it accelerated, and in a swooshing manner disappeared behind the nearby forest's horizon. Also, my father said last week he woke up to get some water, looked out the window, and above the city center saw 3 dots, white dots just idling. Several minutes later they disappeared. It was a cloudy night, so it couldn't have been stars. Not my story, but my mom's. A few years ago, she had finally gotten over her breakup with my dad from at least a decade earlier and started dating. There were a few bad eggs, you know what dating's like. For a few months, she had been dating this one guy, a single dad with 2 daughters whom she met and would go on trips with. One night, whilst driving home from a trip with her then boyfriend and his 2 teenage daughters, they take a shortcut through the woods, and she swears that he, and the 2 daughters saw what was described as some sort of dog man. She wasn't sure what it was, but explained that as the car drove along the wooded road, she saw what appeared to be a half-man, half-dog sitting on a tree stump and watching the road. All 4 people saw it, and she doesn't know exactly what it was. She said it looked like a naked guy covered in fur with a dog's head instead of a human one. I don't believe it myself, but that's her story. Personally, I think it might have just been a homeless dude with a pet dog that she saw at just the right angle to appear like it was one thing instead of 2. I was 23 years old, working as a guard in a forest in Izmir, name I forget. I was drawing, yes, I love drawing animals, birds, and other animals until I noticed running sounds. I took my gun and my flashlight. An old ranger's flashlight was that kind of light that was produced and could actually aim a little more far than a normal flashlight, and when I pointed it toward the sound, I saw a strange creature with long green legs and arms, resembling a horizontal human, standing after catching the light. Then it started running toward the forest, and I was scared to go to my place. I went in and locked the door and waited at the place until the sun rose, and yep, others say it's just a bear or something like it. I know what I saw. When I was 10, my mom bought a house in the middle of downtown. Around that time, things were very rocky with my dad, so I went to spend the summer with my mom. For the first month or so, everything's normal. Just day-to-day, eat, sleep, chill, repeat. Then at the start of July, I go hiking with my stepdad. There was an old trail that ran through the middle of the city that was protected from development by the municipal government. As we're hiking up the trail, two people are riding bikes down it way too fast. One of them collides with me. Somehow my leg ends up wrapped around, up, and bent backward in the metal frame, and I end up rolling. Not the best descriptor, since it's rock, dirt, and grass, down the side of this hill. Stepdad drives me to the hospital. A lot of fractures, bruises, and torn muscles, but no broken bones. At some point my body goes into shock, which for my type of injury is very rare. I'm really not a vocal person, but a familiar voice just keeps saying, Tell them you're in shock. You need to tell them. They administer something to increase blood circulation and jolt me awake. 30 minutes pass with no additional issues. So they're getting ready to send me home, talking to my stepdad about next steps, what he should do in case of emergency, etc. I'm very alert at this point, and the entire room is really bright. I developed lifelong photosensitivity after this incident, but the one corner is just really dark. It just looks like a shadow is there, but all the lights are so bright, it wouldn't be normal for there to be a shadow. I thought I was just seeing things because of the shit they gave me in combination with the injuries. I hit my head rolling down the hill. On our way home now, and my stepdad's asking me what I want for dinner. It's getting late, so he'll order something. Still very alert at this point, I just yell out, "Look out!" When a car is coming from the opposite direction, they sped through a red light and would have hit us if I hadn't said anything. A short while later, we're eating in the living room watching a movie. Whatever the doc gave me is wearing off because I'm having trouble keeping my eyes open. My mom keeps telling me, "You can't go to sleep. You're dealing with a bad concussion." Every time I black out, that same voice from before is just like, "You need to stay awake." Eventually, I hobble my way upstairs to my bed, sit down, take my pants off so I can get a good look at the now very up leg. The rest of the injuries were minor compared to my leg. Out of nowhere, a bat flies out of the crawl space. The door was closed, but it forces the door open so it can fly out. It very quickly flies down the stairs and just kind of flies around the front door. I swear that crawl space looked so much darker than it usually did. It was always dark because there was no light inside, so all you had was the light from the room, but it was like black. I ignore it and go to bed, whatever. I'm still seeing things. Doc said I won't be fully able to trust my senses for the next few days when I recover. 2 or 3 days later, some old wiring in the same crawl space sparks and starts a fire. I noticed it right away, because I kept looking at the door thinking, how the hell does a bat push that huge effing door open? All the while ignoring the fact it's not normal to see bats in this part of the city. After that, my mom started being really mean, cruel even, almost like she blamed me for all of it, so I left to spend the rest of the summer with my uncle. Nothing else happened after that. It took years for me to make sense of it because ever since these incidents, I've been a lot dumber than I was before. I used to be the smartest kid in class, and after that day I've struggled to even be average. I believe something was on that trail and targeted me. The guy who hit me with his bike said he was trying, but he couldn't slow down. I think when it was unsuccessful on the trail, it followed me to finish the job. Shock in the hospital, car running the red light, unconscious in the living room, fire in the crawl space. I believe my best friend protected me. He always said bats were his favorite animal, and no one ever understood why. I mean, they're bats, but he sadly took his life on his 9th birthday because his dad was an abusive alcoholic. 19 years later, I still feel that same pain in my leg. My mom has never been the same since it all happened. Sometimes I think, why me? Life's been a lot harder. I always wanted to be a fireman growing up, and now I never will because I struggle to even walk properly, and I'm not even in my 30s yet. One night, 2 friends and I were to run an errand, and it started to pour rain shortly after we left. We walked past an empty street, and I noticed a really jolly-looking man dancing around in the nighttime rain with an umbrella. I turned to point him out to my friends, who noticed him at the same time as me, and we all looked at each other in reaction to this quirky stranger. And then, when he looked back, not even a second later, he was nowhere to be seen. It just struck us as odd, because there really weren't any places he could have hidden or run away through. It was as if he vanished. We even wandered over to where we'd seen him, trying to find explanations as to how he disappeared. It baffles me to this day. Had this one less than a year ago, and it still chills me to the core. My friend was driving my sister and me around. Sister was in the back seat, and the car was moving when all of a sudden, my sister yelled, "It's time to go," friend's name. Both my friend and I go, "Huh?" And my sister goes, "What?" We ask her what she meant by what she had just said, and she thinks we're pulling her leg. We tell her again, "No, you did actually say that, and what the heck were you talking about?" She has no recollection of saying those words out loud. If both of us hadn't heard it, there's no way my sister would believe she had said that. We kind of laugh about it and poke fun at her for not remembering something she said not even 1 minute earlier. That same day, after my friend drops my sister and me off at home, he gets into a car crash that leaves his car wrapped around a pole and ends up in the hospital, placed into an induced coma. Somehow he survived, but not without long-term issues, and today he walks with a limp. I'm still completely thrown by the fact that this happened not even 4 hours after the situation with my sister, and am convinced it was somehow connected. I was getting milk for some midnight cereal, and as I was opening the door out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move, and I was not ready to do some white people shit and investigate. I ran up the stairs. I lived in a flat, and I was on the top floor. While I was running, I heard another set of footsteps running after me, but when I looked back, there was no one chasing me. I got to my house and locked the door along with the sliding lock that no one knows the name of. You can probably see where this is going. I grab a knife as something is rattling the door handle, obviously trying to get in. I stood inside of a shoe cupboard, next to the front door. As I go into the cupboard, I see the lock and sliding lock both unlock. The door swings open, and nothing. No one came in. I didn't see anyone. I stayed in the cupboard for about 10 minutes, still nothing. I slowly came out, and no one was there. I closed the front door, locking it again, but this time putting a chair in front of it. I slowly checked my house, but I found nothing. I still don't know what was chasing me, but I always get that uneasy feeling of being watched. I wasn't really out at night, about 7 p.m., and I was walking our dog. I was going past the park when I looked behind me and saw a black figure walking behind me. I'm really paranoid, so I was terrified but continued walking normally. I felt it behind me for a while until I had to cross a bridge and the figure disappeared. There was no way that I could have turned another way, since there were no other roads and no things to go behind. I looked behind me, but it just was gone, poof, into thin air. I was really paranoid for the rest of the walk, thinking that I was seeing it in the corner of my eyes. Well, I wasn't alone. I was with my neighbor, who also happens to be my best friend. We snuck out of his house and were walking to a nearby farm that this family owns. We had done this multiple times before, just not to his farm, and it wasn't anything new to us to hear strange sounds because we live where there's a ton of animals and a lot of drug use as well, so hearing weird shit was nothing new. This time, though, was different. As we were walking, I couldn't help but feel like we were being followed. As I kept looking back down the road we came from, the darkness seemed to fade in a way, and we kept walking. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to ruin our night by going back home, but I felt someone following us. I couldn't see anyone, but I knew there was someone there. As we continued to walk, we came across these strangely big deer-like hoof prints in the dirt road. I would say they were moose tracks, but we don't have moose down where we live. Later we get to the farm and he's showing me around since I hadn't been to this specific place before. We get to a place with a small archway, and the path down it is really dark. You can't see shit down there, but then I get this feeling in my gut. You know that feeling of fear you get before going on a roller coaster for the first time? Yeah, that, but imagine it 10 times worse. I look to my buddy and tell him we need to leave, and he agrees. He tells me he didn't want to freak me out, so he didn't say anything, but he saw something following us. We start walking out, and we hear some weird crying noise coming from the archway, and we bolt. As we leave, I see some kind of tall, light figure standing on a dock over one of the ponds. We run all the way back to his house without our shoes on, so our neighbors don't hear the gravel as much. We both know that what was, but I can't say the name. When I was little, I moved into a house in Tennessee. The house was laid out in 3 stories. There was the basement, which smelled like air conditioning and gasoline, the actual part of the house that we slept in, and the attic, which I only went into once, and you're about to find out why. When we first moved in, I decided that I wanted to try the attic for a change. So I made my bedroom, staying away from the exposed insulation and far away from a creepy room in the back of it. My first night went okay, other than the occasional creak of the floorboard, which my mother blamed on the changing weather and the wood of the house expanding or contracting or whatever scientific explanation she came up with. Anyways, on to the second night. I woke up in the middle of the night, which was around 10 p.m. for me because I had a bedtime and wasn't able to breathe well. So I went downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed my bug juice that I was working on that day. I was about to make my way back upstairs when I noticed that my puppy was in his kennel and whining, which isn't out of the ordinary during the day when he was teething. I let him upstairs with me, and he did not want to go up the stairs with me. I had to pick him up and carry him with me so he calmed down. I went back to sleep and later heard whimpering, so I woke up and looked to my side. My puppy was on his back whimpering and scared, but he was looking up. I followed his line of sight, and there was a black figure kneeling on my bed above me, and I noticed that its hands were wrapped around my neck. I was feeling the same difficulty breathing as before, except this time my chest was tightening. I couldn't do anything about it, and I remembered what one of my mom's friends suggested when spooky things happen. I used the last bit of air that I could and whispered, "You aren't welcomed here." Well, that didn't work, and I don't remember anything past that. But I woke up in my bed the next morning, and my puppy was at the door waiting to get out. 11 years later, and I'm not sure if it was a dream or not because it felt real. To start off the story, I'm not into spirits and ghosts, and I find it hard to believe that lucid dreaming is a thing where I sleep. It's just black. My paranormal experience was around 2018 to 2020 before COVID, and I was living in Butte, California, in the middle of the mountains and sand. Everywhere I grew to hate sand. I had 3 mates, including me, sleeping and sharing one bathroom, and this one particular week, I hit the showers and felt dread shivers in coursing hot water as if someone was watching me clearly through the fog. The thing about the experience was surreal. I felt mixed emotions with random thoughts popping in my head as I kept my eyes closed, looked behind me, and didn't look behind me. My roommates working with me, etc. People, more minutes, and standing in the shower, I had a random rush of adrenaline alongside a bumping into me as I tried to reason with myself with some rationality. I wasn't sure how long I was in that shower, just standing. All I knew was my surroundings and my vision impairment as the fog grew thicker, how dim our bathroom light was and the corner of my eye. I started seeing a shadowy silhouette, figure shaped as a person becoming more noticeable. Finally able to muster up my fleeting confidence, I honestly spun around frantically expecting something but was left with nothing, which left me confused and startled. I went on my merry way, getting dressed and ignoring what happened. A few days later, in the same particular week, the visitation in my bathroom never came back to me, and I was about to end my conclusion that my mind was playing tricks on me until my roommate, who was our only spiritual man, mentioned his recent experience. He randomly had that exactly same thing happen to me in the same bathroom. After he announced it and laughed it off, the room ended in silence, as we eyed there, which soon broke into us incoherently blurting out that each one of us just had the same experience, same week, different time and day, just feeling mixed emotions growing stronger with each minute passing by. The memory still sticks with me to this day, as it was the only memory I have of me being in a state of conflict with my own emotions. After the week, none of us experienced any unsettling vibes when we were alone anymore, and if there was a ghost in that same room, I would honestly not be surprised considering where I was during that time. It happened around 2 or 3 years ago. It was almost 3 a.m. and I opened my window. It was really quiet outside. You might think that it's nothing weird at night, but those who live in a city know it's never this quiet. Although you think it's quiet, there are always some sounds, such as cars, buses, trams, or something, even at night. But that night was somehow more quiet than usual. It wasn't scary quiet, but more like peaceful quiet. I don't know how to describe it, but I felt so safe. So I went outside for a short walk. In my country, I feel safe going outside at night, even though I'm a girl. So I wasn't really scared that something might happen. The first half was alright. I really enjoyed the walk. Then I was walking through one place where there are some trees and bushes next to the sidewalk. I suddenly heard a sound from those bushes. It sounded like something between growling and really loud breathing. It didn't sound like a human or any animal that lives here. We don't have any wolves or bears or something like that, so I really don't know what it was. I haven't looked there because I was scared, and I thought that if it were some animal it might attack if I did a sudden move or looked it accidentally in its eyes. When I was farther away from those bushes, I looked there, but I couldn't see anything there. And if there was something, I could maybe see it since it was dark at night. Sometimes I'm thinking about what could possibly make that sound, but I still have no idea. I wasn't alone when it happened, but my cousins Austin, Addison, and Jimmy, and my brother, whose name is also Austin, and I were walking down the old road that led to our house. We were wanting to go ghost hunting, and we got what we wanted. As we turned the corner just past the old church, we heard a very faint screeching noise, like an animal in pain. We were all pretty disturbed, but we kept on. About 5 to 10 minutes later, we heard the same noise again, except it was less than 30 yards away. My brother Austin said that it was probably a hog caught in a hog trap, so we shouldn't be worried. Then out of the blue, we heard a loud rustling sound in the nearby trees, followed by a softer screech. Addison and I got really spooked by this, so we took off and left the others, who were thought to be behind us. Once we made it back to the old church, we stopped and called the home phone. No one answered. So we sat by the entrance to the church and wondered what that thing was and where our cousins were. Eventually, a relative drove by as he left to get ice for the beer cooler. We flagged him down and told him what happened, and he took us back home. I was 10 at the time, and I'm still kind of disturbed about it. Once my cousins and brother got back, they said something ran at them and scratched Jimmy on the arm. And sure enough, there was a big long scratch. That was definitely not a human claw mark. If they were trying to prank us, it was overall a horrifying experience for me. My brother and I were driving back from a New Year's Eve party at about 4 a.m. We had stayed longer to try and sober up a bit, but it had just made us more tired and delusional. We were driving back from Windsor, Ontario, down an extremely flat, boring, featureless, and dark stretch of country road. I was keeping an eye on my brother to see how he was handling this, but I eventually slacked off and was just staring out the window at the bleak winter fields. Suddenly, he hammers on the brakes with a gasp, and I almost go through a windshield. I turn to see him staring, bug-eyed and horrified, out at the empty road. He claims he saw a group of small children run out into the ditch into a patch of our oncoming car, and he described it so well, I could almost visualize it as well. With a shudder, he opens his door and walks out to look around the front of our car. I shifted over and took the wheel because he was, I think, just hallucinating due to sleep deprivation, but it shook us both up. One time I was smoking a joint while driving home late at night on a long ride home from a weekend trip. Sure, I was a bit high, not too bad, So I'm driving along this back road and I start to hear a scratching sound somewhere around my car. Hard to explain, but couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Creepy sound, and I'm getting this feeling like I'm not alone. I don't wait to pull over because I'm paranoid, but I also don't know what to do. So yeah, I pull over and look around the car. The noise stopped. I opened my trunk, and that's when I saw it. An apparition of a young woman and floated out of my car, but not before making the most eerie face at me and disappearing. I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to do. I got back into my car and drove away. I told my roommate about what happened, but they didn't believe me. Only later on the news did I see a news report that a young woman had disappeared and been found dead in the area a few weeks before. I'm pretty sure that's who was in my car. Okay, just kidding. I was just high. And the sound was a stick stuck in my undercarriage.